Welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Albert, and today I'm joined by sustainability consultant Deanna Albert. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, Deval. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really happy that you could join me today.
Same. Happy to be here.
Deanna Albert is a dedicated sustainability professional with over 9 years of experience in executing participatory and stakeholder invested environmental programs for Caribbean governments and organizations. Deanna has held technical, operational, and capacity building positions in the private, public, and civil society sectors, where she played a pivotal role in driving task and project execution and building strong relationships with key stakeholders. She holds an MSc in biodiversity conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean and a BSc environmental and natural resource management with a minor in biology, both from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. So, Deanna, you have been involved in several projects in the area of environmental stewardship, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and biodiversity conservation and management. You have a very diverse background and qualifications. Can you tell us about your journey in the areas of climate change and sustainable development?
Sure. So I will not go into the formals as you gave a little bit in my bio, but I am presently the principal consultant at the Sustainability and the Environment Division at Advisors Next Door. My journey itself into sustainability began in a cliche way, if you will, growing up surrounded by nature, as my grandparents owned a farm and they also loved gardening and nature. So, being embedded into that natural environment from a young age, I continued to have a fascination with the natural world. And as I pursued an education by extension, I pursued or desired to have a profession which focused on nature and the environment and how we interact with it as people. Beyond my formal journey, I consider myself a creative soul, delving into various art forms. So I paint, I do crafting, I do something called paper quilling. My deep-rooted passion for climate change and sustainable development stems from my belief that the natural world is an abundant source of humans' creativity. So I firmly advocate for creativity that fuels innovation. I think it's a personal mission of mine to recognize that our capacity for innovation as humans is really tied to our stewardship of the environment. And because of this, I think that as we embrace sustainability and we draw inspiration from nature, we are going to unlock the potential for groundbreaking discoveries that will help us to change the way we view sustainability. So the way that I think about it, in short, is that just as birds inspire us to fly, a thriving natural environment will provide a fertile ground for our species to take that next great leap forward. So I think that is really where my journey into the world of environmental sustainability and sustainable development kind of sits at and continues to thrive from.
I love what you said about the natural world being an abundant source of human creativity. And I think, like many of us in this space, our interest in nature and sustainability stemmed from just being, as you said, embedded in it from an early age and gaining an appreciation and a love for it and just wanting to see it continue to thrive and also allow others to experience it and love it as we do.
Definitely.
So you mentioned that you are the principal consultant and in the sustainability and environmental division at Advisors Next Door. And Advisors Next Door has been doing some excellent work in climate change and sustainable development. Shout out to Ryan Asiu, the founder, who I'm looking forward to having on the podcast as well.
Great plug there.
Yes. So tell us a bit about Advisors Next Door and its involvement in sustainability and climate education.
Sure. So we are a versatile consulting firm. We operate across multiple disciplines, including advocacy, outreach, education, climate change, permitting, compliance, and biodiversity. Our commitment to sustainability goes through each facet of this work, as we recognize that each area contributes significantly to fostering a more sustainable planet. In the realm of climate-related endeavors, we've spearheaded projects aimed at shaping climate policy, climate change policy, for example, in Caribbean nations, including our own, Trinidad and Tobago. Additionally, we are actively engaging right now in initiatives geared towards propelling our country of Trinidad and Tobago towards a net zero nature positive economy within the next decade. And for us in the climate realm, we know that this really ties to reducing our carbon emissions and increasing our biodiversity conservation to sort of even out that fossil fuel carbon emission issue that we have. When it comes to climate change, our efforts span across various age groups towards climate education. We collaborate with the youth under the age of 18 through various client projects, which we have in our firm, while we also extend our reach to young adults through our own Advisors Academy mentorship program. So to engage the youth under the age of 18, while we utilize a diverse range of approaches, we use things such as interactive videos, incentivized games, brief information talks, group activities, artistic expression, of course, because as a creative, I am going to find a way to have kids draw and paint so that I can also enjoy that. We also have them engage in discussions as well. And our aim is to foster that meaningful conversation among children as young as 7 years old in our programs. And we cover topics that I don't think they would readily be introduced to otherwise. This includes greenhouse gases, the greenhouse gas effect, the repercussions of carbon emissions, the role of fossil fuels, and the potential of renewable energy resources. We discuss these things with them both on a general scale as well as getting into the region and our local context. We give them examples which really they can relate to, examples of renewable energy in the Caribbean, examples of what the government of Trinidad and Tobago is doing for the programs that we run in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, so that they really get that local context and they can tie it to things they know, things they are aware of. For our young adults, it's a little bit different where our education work there focuses on university graduates. And this is something we do as Advisors Next Door, our company itself, and not necessarily through programs that we run with our clients in the consultancy. So this is a program we run ourselves called Advisors Academy, and students that are undergraduate level will gain insight into the environmental sector. They'll learn about the major players in the field. So beyond the governmental or regulatory agencies that we tend to know about most, who are the major players in the field? Who are the major civil society groups? Who are the major private sector groups? And the things that we may not necessarily know at that age, as well as not just who they are, but how to position themselves as undergraduates for success in an extremely competitive profession. Dirval, I know you know, maybe we are probably around the same age and we're not going to say it here, but at the point where we were going to school, a lot of the times the environmental students would be told, you know, the only real avenue for us was HSC, was health and safety, was to go work in the industry and that sort of sector. And now the field is really changing and really just accelerating at a pace that I quite enjoy. And I think for young adults, we want to make sure through the Advisors Academy program that one, they're prepared, but also two, that they are aware of and could remain hopeful for the fact that that narrative is not their reality anymore.
Absolutely. And like you said, when I graduated with my bachelor's in environmental and natural resource, yeah, I think one of the main options was to get into HSC. But I'm really happy to see the evolution of the field and the range of options that are becoming more and more available, especially locally, because internationally we've seen the growth in the sustainability space, and I'm happy to see that it is also being reflected in our local context as well.
For sure. And I think that's not to discredit as well the role of HSC, because in my own journey, I actually was an HSC professional. And I think that there's definitely merit in being an HSC professional and knowing that it does contribute to sustainability. But it's just to broaden the perspective that it's not the only thing, or it's not like the quote unquote default for a lot of us in the profession, and that we have a wide variety, but it definitely does apply as well.
Yes, like you, I started off in HSC and I always appreciate for giving me a really good foundation in terms of understanding the industrial side of things and the demands in terms of business and balancing those priorities. But yeah, like you said, it's good to have other options. And I think it's important, especially as we want more persons to gravitate to the environmental space. And even persons who may not even study environmental management specifically, we see that there are various points of entry into the sustainability space.
Oh, for sure. I mean, under our Advisors Academy program, we've also had students at undergraduate level who've done engineering degrees. So it is an option. There is the potential there once the student is passionate about the field and is able to take what they learn from their degree and really apply it. I mean, I always say a degree is just a capacity to do a certain amount of work at a specific level, whether it's bachelor's or master's level or all the way up to PhD. So I think it's related. And I do believe that a lot of students who potentially might be in related sectors don't need to necessarily close themselves off to the option. I think there's a lot of potential up and coming for finance, for economics, just various facets, even the engineering, as I said.
Yes. So, Deanna, what are some of the key challenges and misconceptions surrounding climate change that you have encountered in your work?
So I think as sustainability professionals at Advisors Next Door, we encounter a few challenges and misconceptions in our work when we work within the climate change realm. Now, firstly, I believe climate change is a very multifaceted issue and it's very interconnected. There's a lot of social, economic, and environmental dimensions. And this really requires adept navigation of the complexities associated with that. And most importantly, effective communication to stakeholders. I think it's really important that everybody within the civil society, the private, and the governmental sector, that we are all really thinking about how these things are going to impact not just the environment, but that social and economic dimension as well. Secondly, resistance to change poses a significant challenge, as when we think about sustainable practices, I think it does demand a shift in not just what we do, but those established systems and behaviors. And the behavior is really what I think could be met with reluctance from individuals, but also businesses and governments, right? And so I think that significant shift in behavior and culture also takes some tugging. So I think the most prominent example is in us as sustainability professionals trying to get the public, but also individuals, businesses, and governments to understand the importance of recycling, but also the other related R's. So the reuse, the reduce, most importantly, and understanding why the reduce is so much more important than just recycling. And also the refuse, refusing the straws, refusing the plastic bag, and why those things are ultimately very important to change in your behaviors. And that brings me to my last point with respect to some of the key challenges, which is really a lack of awareness and education about climate change and how that really prevents meaningful progress throughout the entire grasp of society. I think there needs to be more awareness, more education to understand science, to understand the necessary actions, and to really help us towards preventing those things that might hinder sustainable solutions. So in short, I think addressing these sort of challenges will really require a comprehensive approach, as I said before, really driving home that social, economic, and environmental dimension, and really kind of embedding it into education, advocacy, and collaborative strategies. So between governments, between civil society, between the public to really drive that actionable change.
Climate change and sustainable development is definitely multifaceted. It's never just a single issue. And as much as we want action, I think a precursor to that is awareness. And you mentioned that being one of the challenges. And similarly, I use the Climate Conscious podcast as a platform to build awareness amongst the local population about the localized impacts, but also the global context when it comes to climate change and sustainable development, and really to help people make that direct connection between their day-to-day lives, their choices, their actions, and the wider impact it has on their community, their country, and this global village that we live in.
For sure.
You mentioned engaging with youth under 18 as young as 7. What innovative and effective teaching methods have you used to educate children and teenagers about sustainability and climate issues?
So I think, firstly, I cannot take the credit for this as an individual. We have an amazing team at Advisors Next Door who leads curriculum development and really drives our educational programs. So I just want to say that as my plug for them. But at Advisors, in our educational programs, we've blended technology, creativity, and competitiveness to engage students in learning about sustainability and climate issues. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this part because for our primary school students under one of our programs, we designed a 12-module course which covers topics such as biodiversity, climate change, renewable energy. We teach them about ecosystems and biomes and about the locally endangered animals. The reason being is that a lot of kids in the region, Caribbean-wide, I think, they know a lot about the lion, the tiger. They know that it's endangered because they see it all the time. There's so much great education. And so we felt that while we were doing this course and developing it, we had to include some endangered Caribbean level species, endangered Trinidadian species, because it is a program focused on Trinidad and Tobago. And so when we did that, we really felt like it would be pertinent to include some local context. And so each of these 12 modules features an animated video narrating the day's lesson with a fun twist. It's a hidden item for a scavenger hunt. So in every video, there's a hidden item for a 12 series scavenger hunt, and the grand prize being a tablet for the kids. Because we know they love a tablet, they love to sit down and watch their games and play their games, and look at their TV shows. So this approach really worked well. It kept the kids excited and focused throughout that 12-module program with visual aids from the animations, because each animation tied to the actual lesson they would be learning during that module or class. And it really kept them sort of engaged. And using the video, we were able to engage them throughout the actual session. So we would tie it back to that video. If it was about climate change, for example, we would tie it back to the things that were presented in the video. And it was also done in a prose way. So each module was also narrated as a poem. So that it was also very fun for them to listen to and engage with. And it would be hard for them to lose their attention because they're also trying to pay attention to find that hidden item, right? At primary level, it really worked well. They were super excited for it. It was really a joy to do. For secondary students, we had to change it a bit. So we employed a mix of group work and interactive games, also to engage their competitiveness across a same or similar 12 module curriculum, obviously tiered up in terms of content for their level educationally. These sessions included games that resemble game shows or debates. So think of Jeopardy, think of those type of shows or game shows where it's point based and you're playing in teams, so you really get that competitiveness in them. And also they are offered prizes to win as these groups, so they really get into it, and it's focused on the material that they would have gone through during the sessions that are presented. So they have to pay attention, they have to remember things. And usually we give them little hints while they're doing work in the session. Make sure you're paying attention because we have a game later on. And then the other thing that really engaged older students was to create a product. So we introduced ArcGIS story maps to the students at secondary level. And these kids range from 13 to 17. And we had them produce content that feeds into a story map focused on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So they not only get knowledge about the SDGs, but they're also able to create a product that is a little bit more interesting to them because it's on the internet. It's technology based. It's something that also they can access. And for the ones who are a little older and are now going out of Form 6 and into the world of either higher education or work, it also is an asset to them because we tell them, once published and once public, it becomes something that they can reference as contributing to on their resume. And it really looks really good, I think, for students at that age, that they're able to contribute to something that becomes a product that is public facing.
That's really impressive work, Deanna. I am so happy to know that we are engaging children and teenagers on sustainability and climate issues, meeting them at their level and providing knowledge, skills, and access to technology, and also positioning them for a resilient future. I think we can agree that when we started out, there weren't many opportunities for mentorship. As we mentioned earlier, there weren't many options or pathways that available to us, and we kind of had to figure it out and create the paths. It's always good to, I think, make it a bit easier for those coming after us, widening the scope of what is available to persons who want to and who are passionate about environmental stewardship and sustainability.
For sure. I mean, I think that is the millennial manager mindset, I think they call it, where we don't gatekeep. I think that's the word that Gen Z uses. I hope nobody laughs at me during this podcast for that. But yeah, I think it's also why advisors, it's a big reason why we do Advisors Academy, because at undergraduate level, we really were thrown into a sector that we had no idea about, and we had to figure it out. And I think it's more pertinent to give younger graduates that edge because they become more efficient way more quickly than we did. And I think we could use all the help we could get in the sustainability sector because it's a big job, right? It's the entire planet. So I think it's definitely important what you said. And also, I think the other thing is, especially for primary and secondary school kids, they need to be reminded that sustainability or sustainable development or climate change people often lump it together as just all environmental work. People hear environmental work, and some people still think of it as only, oh, you conserving plants, or you protecting the animals, you're protecting the rivers and the seas, and they think it's only about the planet when it's really about the planet and the people. And I think that we need to remind people that these things are very intertwined from a young age, so that a child is not only thinking that if I'm, if I'm allergic to a lot of things in nature and I really like nature, but I feel like I can't be an environmentalist because I can't do field work, right? Which is actually my own life story. I'm allergic to a lot of things, and I really did want to be in the environmental sector. And I felt like, maybe I can't do it. But I think that exposing them to how you can be in sustainability or work in climate change and work in technology, work in the banking sector, work in education, work in, in the energy industry. Those are all things that I think we need to expose children to at a very young age so that they're not closing themselves off to opportunity which may align to their passions.
Yes. Regardless of your interests, whether it's economics, engineering, the creative arts, education, there is a sustainability rule for everyone.
For sure.
So, can you share any inspiring success stories on the impact of your sustainability and climate education initiatives?
Sure. So I can share one story, I think, at the very young age and one at maybe undergraduate level, briefly.
Okay.
I'll start with the students at primary level. So we had a particular student at primary level who entered one of our sustainability courses, who was extremely shy, extremely soft-spoken. I mean, you could hardly hear this child. And through engagement in the course and while learning about topics like recycling, the planet, animals, nature, climate change, we saw that she developed more confidence in speaking, and she was able to participate in an exhibit which showcased the sustainability course in question. And during this exhibit, we tend to specifically ask students to become ambassadors for the course during the exhibit. So a few students we actually position with their mentors, where they will talk about different topics. And we wanted to give her the opportunity because we saw that it was developing and we saw the potential in her. And we were not disappointed at the exhibit, even though she started off a little shy and soft-spoken. By the end of it, she was sharing information to the public at an event about recycling and the importance of not littering, alongside a mentor who came from one of the major players in the recycling sector of Trinidad and Tobago to be a part of our exhibit. And so it was really one of the proudest moments I think our team felt, looking at her so shy, so soft-spoken, and is helping that mentor give out flyers and share about recycling, about the importance of reducing their waste, speaking to the public, and really engaging and being, just so cute. At 8 years old, this impact was definitely one that we felt was really valuable. I mean, because ultimately you could see that she understands the valuable topics, but the most impactful result for us was the confidence that she had to speak about it. Because now that she has that, coupled with the knowledge, she will become an agent of change. She will now share her education, her knowledge for a more sustainable future. And then one of the other things that I wanted to share was at undergraduate level, we have had, and I wouldn't necessarily point out one because I think they're all really excellent, at our Advisors Academy mentorship program. We have some brilliant undergraduate students who pass through our programs. It runs from April to about June, so it runs during the off period for undergraduate students, basically, because one thing we do not want to do is interfere with their schoolwork. And every single one of these students is so bright, so educated, so brilliant, but they become so much more driven after the academy program because they have this knowledge of the sector. They have this intimate understanding of how to enter the sector, of where to go, of what spaces exist, of what avenues exist, and that diversity that really is exploding in the sustainability realm for them to dip their toes into and figure out what they actually want to do. And I think it's always great for me to see the academy graduates move on and excel in everywhere that they go.
Those are some really amazing stories, very encouraging and inspiring. I must commend you and the team for the work that you all are doing in sustainability and climate education and shaping, I guess, Gen Z. um, so, yes.
They definitely help us as well. And I think that's the good thing about it. Gen Z, as well as the youngest one, I think is Alpha now.
Oh, so, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think they also help us. They teach us as well. There's so much that they are open to. And I think their ability to adapt to technology and to be open to it and to really understand it combines with our ability to, yes, understand it, but also the fact that we grew up with technology as millennials. So we still had a period where we didn't have computers. We had to read from books. We had to find out information from newspapers and, people. And so I think that blend of us having both worlds and them growing up with a boom in technology with AI and all of these things, I think it blends well for the future that we are going to have in sustainability as a sector.
Yes, and addressing sustainability and climate change definitely requires an intersectional and intergenerational approach. So, this is definitely to our benefit in terms of coming up with solutions and strategies, pulling from our strengths and working together for a sustainable future. So, based on your experience, what are some of the new and unconventional career paths that sustainability and climate action have made available to students? And I know you kind of hinted at this, but you could probably give some clearer examples.
Sure. So, I mean, as a Caribbean sustainability professional, I think that sustainability and climate action in particular has really opened up several new and unconventional career paths for students, both nationally but also regionally. So I think from a regional perspective, because a lot of us could get hired in Trinidad, yes, and get hired in other Caribbean islands if there are other Caribbean nationals listening in. But you also don't have to close off your options to only where you live. As a region, we have small island developing states that have very similar situations. And so our expertise really goes beyond where we live in the Caribbean, and we can really be regional professionals. So I think something like sustainable tourism management is something I've seen really popping up, where a lot of hotels, a lot of ministries, even in small islands, they are trying to work towards minimizing their environmental impact from tourism. Because for some islands, this is their main bread and butter. And so they are trying to become more sustainable while promoting their cultural preservation and their economic development. I mean, even in Trinidad and Tobago, we are moving towards it. Another one that I find very promising is renewable energy consultancy. And so this is one that I think is really exploding. The Lesser Antilles Islands are really accelerating their exploration of renewable energy. You see it a lot with solar panels being installed in a lot of businesses, a lot of government agencies. And so I think being a renewable energy consultant is definitely an avenue that undergraduates and graduates, as they consider their career paths, they could consider going into renewable energy consultancy professionals, because there's a wide variety of companies that are popping up now that are focusing on energy sources such as solar and wind in particular.
We're both from Trinidad and Tobago, which is steeped in oil and gas. But as you mentioned, the development in the renewable energy space, I think that is also something that is important for upcoming graduates, looking at their future and their career trajectory before, the thing was to get into the oil and gas sector. But we also have to factor in the just transition and the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities that would open up there. And therefore, we would want our upcoming graduates to be equipped with the tools that are necessary for the energy transition. Of course, there are transferable skills, but they also can have a head start in terms of really focusing on sustainable energy. And like you mentioned, renewable energy, which is where the energy sector should be evolving to.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it happens in very small hints. I mean, I think in the 1980s, which is definitely before I existed, I am going to say very clearly right now. But I think in the 1980s, it was very common to call our economy oil and gas, an oil and gas economy, right? And over time, I think, I don't know if I'm the only person, I cannot be the only person who's noticed it's shifted to the energy economy. We have an energy-based economy. And those things are very intentional, I think, in my opinion, because an energy economy doesn't have to be oil and gas anymore. It can be renewable energy. And so I think we are making these small shifts because words have a big impact in how we think. And if we continue to say oil and gas, we continue to stay in oil and gas. And by all means, we need to transition properly, appropriately, and in a way that considers our social, economic, and environmental impacts equally. However, there needs to be some transition or embedding of renewable energy for us to really pay attention to the impacts we're making in terms of climate issues and climate related disasters that are occurring. And so I strongly agree with you that yes, there are transferable skills, but I think more than that, the energy sector themselves are already making moves and hinting at their own transitions. And so I think it's definitely where graduates and students alike should be paying attention. We're no longer oil and gas, we're energy, and that's for a reason. There are master's programs, there's undergraduate programs, there's even certificate programs that focus on renewable energy. For people who like to follow a more hands-on approach where they want to be technicians, for example, there's programs that offer certificates now in how to become solar panel technicians, because those are things we're going to need. And so I think those are the opportunities that people need to sort of explore and dip their toes in. And yes, you may be an engineer now, but consider doing those courses or additional resources to kind of bolster yourself and become more resilient yourself as a professional. I mean, me, myself, I also continue to do that. There's no way I could stay a professional in this field and not continue to learn.
For sure, continuing education is imperative. You made a point that made me reflect on my own journey, starting off in environmental and then venturing into, I did the MBA that specialized in sustainable energy management. And to be honest, at the time it was a bit risky. I think now it's less risky because that you are seeing more opportunities. I know back then people were like, "Why are you doing renewable energy?" So even for persons who are considering maybe pivoting their trajectory from a more conventional pathway into something that is a bit less established, I would encourage you to try it. As you said, dip your toes in, maybe do some short courses and get some experience, maybe internships or volunteer work just to get a taste of what is possible because the world is evolving so fast and things are shifting and we are shifting in the direction of sustainability. So you really can't go wrong by investing or upskilling or retooling in the direction of sustainability and climate action.
Definitely, 100% agree. I actually think I was this the Auto Lockjack MBA because I considered that same degree
Yeah.
as well. And I do remember it being a risky move at the time, but it did look very promising, I must admit.
Yeah, I have no regrets because that really opened up my world or the world of sustainability to me. Because at the time I was doing HSC in the oil and gas sector and wanting to really have a greater impact in terms of promoting sustainability, recognizing that we would always need energy, but there are so many other options that we can include into our mix and not just be locked in to oil and gas. So, what advice would you have for parents and educators on fostering eco consciousness and an interest in pursuing sustainability in children and teenagers?
For sure, I think leading by example is definitely important for children and teenagers, especially. So, I think for adults and educators, parents, and people who will be around children, demonstrating eco friendly behaviors such as recycling, reducing your impact or your use of plastics in general, refusing things that are not sustainable. Those are things that kids are going to pay attention to. Conserving your energy, reducing your waste sends a powerful message because they're going to mimic what you do. Additionally, I think integrating sustainability into the curriculum could really help students understand the connectedness of environmental, social, and economic issues, and to really drive home that learning about the environment and learning about sustainability is not only learning about plants and animals and the planet, it is learning about us, about our species, how we interact with it, how our social and economic systems interact with it, and why we actually need it to continue living comfortably as a species. I think we've seen this in our execution of courses outside of the school curriculum. And we've seen how it complements what they learn in school already through our discussions with them, through their group work, and through how they react to the course and to the content. Another one I think really drives home eco consciousness for youth is encouraging outdoor exploration and hands on learning, such as gardening or nature walks. I think it deepens children's connection to the natural world and inspires that sense of stewardship that we really need from youth to encourage them to be more sustainable in the long run. Like I said at the start, I grew up around nature. I grew up in nature. I grew up outside exploring 10 different type of mango, pomerac, flowers, all these things, animals like chickens and ducks and seeing them. So I think especially the younger generation, because they grow up with technology so much more than we grew up with technology. And that's not a bad thing, but also they need to still have that connectiveness to the outdoor world, because I think that is what is going to make them remember that that is also part of them. And we also see this through programs we do at Advisors Next Door, because part of our courses also involve field trips for some of the programs that we run. And at these field trips, we carry them to venues that will showcase wildlife in their natural habitat, showcases agricultural practices such as permaculture and hydroponics, and just shows them various natural habitats itself if they've never been exposed to it, such as forests and swamps and rivers. And the ability to actually see and view and be in these areas really gets them embedded and sort of in a state of wonder for the area. They're able to explore it and really appreciate it. I think the last thing is that it's really important to involve children and teenagers in decision making related to sustainability. So, if your child learns about recycling at a course or in school and they come home and they want to recycle, encourage that and encourage that decision making from a household perspective so that they are able to now take ownership of their actions and that they feel proud that they've encourage their entire household into collecting recyclables, for example. So I think in doing these things and also in talking to them and having discussions with them, just generally about the importance of sustainability, I think it could really instill a sense of responsibility within youth so that they become agents of change. Just like our example of the young girl who learned how to be more confident just through going into the course and making friends and being able to speak to us about the topics we were teaching her. She is now going to be able to speak more about it in of itself and share that knowledge about recycling. So I think these are the things that really drive home youth learning about sustainability and becoming advocates for a more resilient and thriving planet.
Deanna, thank you so much for sharing those great insights on fostering eco-consciousness in children and teenagers. We can all agree that sustainability and climate education are essential for raising awareness, fostering innovation, and also advancing inclusion and justice as we address the climate crisis. And as you also mentioned, it's critical for overcoming the resistance to change and really shifting the established culture, systems, and behaviors that are not conducive to a more resilient and sustainable world. So as we wrap up today's very insightful episode, I would love to hear from you. What would make the world a better place?
So I don't know if this is potentially unconventional for this forum. I feel maybe people would expect me to say learning more about sustainability or caring for the planet. But at the foundation of everything, because I often think about this, I don't know why, I think consideration would make the world a better place. Actual consideration among people and for each other. So, for example, there's a really popular topic in TNT that we see this being demonstrated all the time, using indicators on the road. So I think it's the lack thereof which results in an unneeded risk of endangering those around you while you drive. And I think using this as an example, it often makes me think how much more we could achieve as humans if we were even a little more considerate to each other on an everyday basis. It's those simple gestures that could have significant implications, not just on the road, but in every aspect of our lives, including sustainability. So just being mindful of our actions and their impact on others is fundamental to fostering a more sustainable society and just a better world.
Don't get me started on indicator use, but I completely and totally agree with you.
I often think about things like this in traffic, because traffic is another one we could talk about for probably as long as it takes us to get to Port of Spain, right? From anywhere else.
I know. Yeah. So how can listeners connect with you?
So you guys can follow along on all of the things that I spoke about by following the consultancy firm, Advisors Next Door. You can get us on LinkedIn at Advisors Next Door, as well as on Instagram at Advisors Next Door. On Facebook, it's slightly different. It's Advisors Next Door Consultants. And we also have a website, advisorsconsultants.com. And if you follow us there, you'll get updates on all of the projects that we do, all of the work that we do and will be doing.
Well, thank you, Deanna, for joining me today and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much for having me, Jerval. I look forward to listening to, maybe not this, because I do not like to hear myself, but all the other podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Conscious Podcast. We hope you found today's episode interesting, informative, and inspiring. Visit theclimateconscious.com for more info. I'm Derval Bazi, and this is the Climate Conscious Podcast.